You've been programmed to believe that change takes years, that it only comes with sheer effort or a blessing from something outside of you. But what if I told you that this idea has been implanted, and that it keeps you right where you are? The truth is that your body and mind operate like a highly trainable biological system, and that it can be reprogrammed in just 20 minutes a day. Yes, 20 minutes. No years of struggle, no external magic formulas. There is a technique so powerful, so absurdly effective, that most people simply ignore it because it seems too simple. But it is precisely this simplicity that makes the process transformative. When you access this inner point between thought and emotion, you literally change the chemistry of your body, the structure of your brain, and the vibration you emit. And this is not belief, it is science, pure biology. And I am here to show you the way. For years, I believed that genetics determined who I was. But the more I studied cells, the more I realized that it was the environment, and especially thoughts, that activated genes. That's when everything turned upside down. I discovered that what I think, feel, and repeat has a direct impact on how my body responds. Thoughts are not just ideas. They are biological commands. I began to notice how my body responded when I changed my thinking. If I woke up believing that the day was going to be difficult, my body would tighten, my breath would become shallow, and my energy would disappear. But when I caught myself affirming, with sincerity, that something amazing was already happening, I felt different. It was like flipping an internal switch. My entire system responded as if it were real. This effect is so tangible that I began studying people who were cured simply by changing their beliefs. And it wasn't a miracle. It was pure science. Intentional thought changed cellular behavior. I saw tumors shrink, pain disappear, diagnoses become obsolete. It all started with a change in mental state. That's when I started saying, mind over matter isn't just philosophy, it's applied biology. I once decided to do an experiment with myself. I took on a personal challenge, something that had been frustrating me for years, and every day for 20 minutes, I began affirming that it had already been resolved. I didn't just say it, I felt it. I saw myself in that scenario. I felt the relief. I even laughed as if it were true. And within a few weeks, what had seemed impossible began to rearrange itself in my reality. This is the most impressive part. The brain does not differentiate between what is real and what is deeply imagined with emotion. When I understood this, everything made sense. The emotional visualization became a rehearsal for the future. And the more I repeated it, the more I reinforced the neural network of that new experience. It is like training the body to live what the mind has already lived, even before it happened. It's not about being positive all the time. That's superficial. The point is, my thoughts create chemical signals, and those signals affect my hormones, my immune system, my heart. So when I started changing my thoughts regularly, everything in my body started to operate at a different pace. It was like a new reality was beginning to emerge inside me, and eventually, outside of me too. Today, when something is not flowing, I no longer ask, why is this happening to me? I ask, what am I thinking repeatedly that is creating this field? Because thought becomes a field, and a field generates reality. This perception took me out of the victim condition and put me in the place of creator. And that's when I began to understand why the way we declare something changes everything. But it's no use just thinking. The way I talk to myself, the way I act, the way I imagine. Everything has to be in sync. And it was precisely through this practice that I discovered something even more powerful, the conscious decree. Because when thought, word, and action go together, the body obeys, and so does the universe. For a long time, I noticed something curious about people who changed their lives easily. They knew how to make decrees. But it wasn't just any old decree, mechanical or empty. It was something alive, pulsating, with emotion and truth. I realized that these people weren't talking about the future. They were affirming the now. The first thing I adjusted in myself was the tense. No more "I'll get it someday" or "when I get lucky." I started saying, "I already have it. I am. It's done." This reprogrammed my subconscious, because the subconscious doesn't understand time. It only obeys the emotional frequency embedded in the statement. The second step was to emotionalize these statements. What's the point of saying "I'm abundant" when I look like I've paid my bill? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and put myself in the scene. I felt the touch, the smell, the sound of victory. My body needed to believe it before any evidence. It was like a rehearsal of the reality I wanted to live. For example, if I declared I am healthy, I would see myself running on the beach, full of energy, smiling. This would trigger emotions, so real that my brain would start creating healing hormones. This wasn't blind faith, it was neuroscience in action. The third step was to behave as if it were already real. And this, I confess, is where many get stuck, because the ego screams, "But it's still not true." And I responded with attitude, "Then let me act as if it were." And I started walking, talking, choosing, and even breathing like someone who already had what they wanted. I once claimed for weeks that I was an internationally recognized scientist. At the time, no one knew me outside the lab, but I acted like one. I studied more, wrote with authority, prepared myself to be invited, until, without me looking for it, the invitation arrived. Coincidence? No. Answer: this process requires consistency, not perfection. I couldn't always maintain the high standard, but I kept coming back to center every day. Because the decree is like an anchor. It reminds me of who I'm choosing to be. And, repeated truthfully, it shapes not only the body, but the field around it. And it was by practicing these 3 steps that I began to understand something even deeper. What sabotages us is not the lack of effort, but the wait mentality. That subtle trap that takes us away from what is already available, if we are able to embrace now who we decide to be. For years, I too was a prisoner of this subtle idea. When I get this, then I'll be happy. And this belief left me, spinning in circles, waiting for the world to deliver to me what only I could create from the inside out. I thought I needed ideal conditions to act, but I was actually outsourcing my power. It was a shock to realize that waiting was a prison. In itself, the mind loves to condition everything. When I have money, I'll feel secure. When I'm loved, I'll be confident. But the body, this incredible biological system, responds to what you feel now, not what you promise to feel in the future. So I started to flip the equation. Instead of waiting to feel confident, I started acting as if the confidence was already mine. It wasn't easy at first. My mind would call me an imposter. But I would say, "No, this is neural rehearsal. This is intentional biology." When I behaved like someone who was accomplished, my brain would start creating networks that matched that image. And soon, my entire body would align with this new frequency. It was as if the future began to anticipate the present. I remember well the time when I was waiting for academic recognition. I kept saying, "One day my work will be valued." But while I was saying that, I was internally putting myself in the position of someone who was undervalued. Until I changed. I started writing articles as if the world was already listening to me. And, interestingly, the world started responding. This constant waiting trains us to accept scarcity as a normal state. And what's worse, it reinforces the idea that the external needs to change in order for the internal to change. But it's exactly the opposite. It was when I started to feel prosperous, even with my account in the red, that opportunities began to appear. The quantum field responds to emotional coherence, not to the logic of the bank statement. The key for me was this: stop reacting to what I see and start creating from what I decide to feel. It's a kind of internal rebellion against social programming, because the world teaches us to wait for external approval, and I decided to be the approval myself. I started acting, thinking, walking, and even eating as if I were already living. My best scenario. Today I teach, now is the only real moment that exists. If you are not happy now, you will not be happy when you get there, because the brain will always postpone the finish line, and that is addictive. It is addictive to waiting. It is addictive to searching. It is addictive to wanting. But creation happens when you affirm, I already am. I already have. It is here, with me, now. And it was when I let go of waiting that I began to understand the true essence of creation. It's not asking, it's embodying. And at that moment, a new question began to pound in my mind. What if everything I desire is actually already waiting? For me, if I make myself compatible with it. One of the most powerful discoveries of my life was understanding that the universe does not deliver what you ask for with words, but rather what you emanate with your vibration. For a long time I believed that it was necessary to want it hard, but that kept me stuck in desire and not in fulfillment. It was only when I understood that I needed come back that I wanted. Everything started to change. What does this mean? In practice? It means that if I want peace, I need to live like someone who is already at peace. If I want prosperity, I need to act like a prosperous being. There is no point in saying I want abundance while living in fear of spending $5. The energy field does not hear words, it feels frequencies. And your frequency is shaped by your state of being. That's exactly why I started paying attention to how I felt throughout the day. If I said I wanted love but felt rejection, I was sending mixed signals. I started to observe my choices, my thoughts, and even my tone of voice. Everything communicates to the universe who I am being, and the universe can only give me what matches that. The best analogy I can give is that of the radio. You don't hear 105.7 by tuning into 92.3, right? Life is the same. I couldn't expect to be in tune with happiness while vibrating resentment. So I started to reconfigure my routines. I included feeling-focused meditations, changed my body posture, and made small choices that aligned with the reality I wanted to attract. A simple example, I wanted health. So I started eating like a healthy person, not because someone told me to, but because that was the energetic signal most consistent with my new state. The body perceives, the field responds. And little by little, my exams started to improve. It was no miracle. It was biological coherence between what I thought, felt, and did. I realized that it's not about attracting in the usual sense of the word. It's not like a passive magnet. It's more like a mirror. Reality reflects who you are inside. And for that to happen, the first change needs to be internal. There's no point in wanting new results with old thoughts. That's why I started updating myself every day. And the more I behaved like someone who was aligned with my dreams, the more strange coincidences began to happen. An unexpected call, a new proposal, a scientific paper that appeared at just the right time. It was as if the universe was saying, now you're ready. But in reality, it was just my frequency finally meeting what was already available. And it was by living like this that I began to understand that daily rituals are the true engines of this silent transformation. It's not enough to understand intellectually. You have to embody the new self you want to see reflected in yourself every day. And that's precisely what led me to establish habits that reconnect me with this elevated state every day. The first thing I realized about real transformation is that it doesn't come from big one-off decisions, but from small rituals repeated with intention. It was only when I started to ritualize my days that my biology began to respond consistently. The brain loves repetition. And the subconscious, which controls 95% of our lives, learns by habit, not by momentary willpower. So every day when I woke up, I made a commitment to repeat specific affirmations. These weren't just words, They were biological commands. Things like, I am healthy, my mind is clear, I attract aligned opportunities, and most importantly, I said them with emotion, as if I was remembering something that was already true. This completely changes the effect on the body. Before going to sleep, I would do something even more profound. I would enter a light meditative state and begin to visualize what I wanted to experience, as if it had already happened. I would see myself receiving phone calls, celebrating achievements, laughing peacefully. This created an internal environment where my body would rest, already aligned with what I wanted to experience. Sleeping in this state is like sending a message to the quantum field, and that's where the secret lies. Repeating these practices reconditions your cells, hormones, and perception of reality. Most people want change, but they continue to live on autopilot. I chose to break out of that mode. I replaced negative news with reading books like The Biology of Belief or The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. This nourishes the mind with new possibilities. It's not about doing 1,000 things. It's about doing a few things with presence. For example, instead of rushing out the door in the morning, I dedicate 10 minutes to silence. I take a deep breath, put on some soft music, and let my body remember the frequency I want to live in. 10 minutes. That already changes my nervous system and raises my vibration for the rest of the day. Throughout the day, I created conscious triggers. Every time I washed my hands, for example, I would mentally repeat, I release what does not serve me. When I drank water, I would say, I nourish myself with what expands me. It may seem small, but the subconscious loves symbols. And these gestures, when done with intention, communicate directly with the deep mind. Science shows that consistency breeds neuroplasticity. And that's exactly what I started seeing in my tests. My hormone levels stabilized, my immune response improved, my sleep became deeper. And I didn't change my DNA, I changed the environment that communicates with it. That's epigenetics in action. That's where ritual becomes revolution. And as these habits took root, I realized that it was no longer a practice. It was a new way of being. The ritual ceased to be an obligation and became a pleasure. And at that point, change not only manifested itself, it sustained itself. Now that you have this knowledge in your hands, the question is straightforward. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to let this information become just another mental note? Or are you going to apply it for real, even if it's just for 3 days in a row, just to see what happens? Most people keep waiting for a sign, but maybe this video may have been the sign you were asking for. What if you start today? What if 20 minutes a day is exactly what you need to turn your life around? You can continue following the old pattern, or you can try the new one with courage and curiosity. What's at stake here is not theory. It's your reality, your body, your mind, your realm of possibilities.